Copyright in these lectures is either owned by the ANU or a third party who has licensed the ANU to use it. Students may use the recording for personal study only. No lecture may be communicated online, copied or shared without the prior permission of the ANU.
Now, first of all, I'd like to give you more information about the tutorial schedules. Now, the information is already on Wordle, so you can have a look at that. And yes, and if there is any questions, we can talk about that in a minute. Okay. So as we talked about last week, for the tutorial, the first 5 weeks, we have class discussions only. All right, so there are questions. So for each tutorial, there are 3 questions. So we will discuss those questions. So if starting from week 6 until week 12, so each of you will present a tutorial questions, okay, and also submit a paper, or we'll just call it tutorial paper, right? Basically answering the tutorial questions, and then you submit it as part of the assessments, okay? Except week 9, as I mentioned last week, in week 9, because we have guest lecturers, right, from the Australian National Audit Office, as well as 2 former Auditor Generals, right, who present the lectures. So it's 3 hours during that week, right? Yeah, as such, the normal tutorials is replaced by the 3rd hours, okay? And so the tutors, as I say, tutors will still be available for consultation during the normal hours, during the in the normal venue. All right. So if you have any questions and take that week, right, for you to clear up any queries, right, regarding to the course material or your tutorial questions or assignment questions, whatever, right? And because in week 10 you have to submit your assignment 2 anyway, okay? So right. So for the tutorial, the purpose of the tutorials, of course, is for us to discuss the course material more in depth, and also help you to understand or clarify anything that you have queries regarding the course topic. Now, so the presenting students, right? The presenting students will expect you to be well prepared, right, for the selected questions, and so you have to present the major issues related to the questions. Now, the role of the presenting students is to start the conversation, all right, during the tutorial, okay, and stimulate the discussions. So, and all other students, they are also expected to prepare all the tutorial questions prior to the class, right, so that you can participate in the discussions. So we hope we have some lively and productive tutorial, right, during the semesters, and I hope you enjoy that. Okay. All right. The requirement, as we say, each student have to submit 1 tutorial paper, right, and also present one, so only once, okay, for the whole semester. These selections of tutorial questions will start in week 3, okay, and you need to sign up to select a question through Wordle. So the tutor will talk to you more about the sign up, right, when it will start, and when you can start selecting, etc. Okay. Now, not all the tutorial questions will be available yet, right? But you can select a time slot and a topic, right, that you prefer. Okay. Now, one thing just to remind you, you need to sign up a tutorial class in order to be able to select the questions. Okay, because only students in that tutorial can select the question in that tutorial class. Okay, so you need to sign up a tutorial class. So for any one of you, if you haven't signed up for a tutorial class, please sign up as soon as possible. Okay, so the tutorials, you can still enroll in tutorial this week. All right, so if you haven't done so, please do that. Okay. The class presentation is only 5 minutes, as mentioned last time, and we have 10 minutes for discussion. So as it says there, it's only 5 minutes, so the presenters start the conversations, talk about the major issues, and then for the rest of the class, we have enough time for discussions, right, within the class, okay? The paper that you submit, we expect it to be in the form of an essay. Okay, so you follow the format of an essay. PowerPoint slides are only for presentation, so there's no need to submit your PowerPoint slides, right? Only the paper. Okay, so the due date is Tuesday 9 a.m. of the week of presentation. So if whoever presents, say, in week 6, so your tutorial paper is due at 9 a.m. in week 6. Okay. So submit through Wordle. So follow all the same process, right, as you submit an assignment. Now the maximum word is only 400 words, right? So it's a short, but you have to discuss up to the point, okay? Maintain the substance, okay? But it's within the word limit. So just try, okay? Excluding references. Preferably double-line spacings, okay, or similar font size, okay? Now, because it's short, so you just answer the question directly. There's no need to include any introductions, conclusions, etc. Just answer the question directly, okay? But you do need to have a list of references. If you borrow people's idea, you do need to do all the proper referencing, okay? So don't plagiarize, all right? So if you borrow people's idea, do proper referencing. Now, I provide some example here about the Harvard referencing systems, okay? So if you're not quite sure, so you can have a look at the examples here, or you can look at other guidance, right? So on website, ANU websites, or other websites, okay? All right, so I think that's all I want to talk to you about the tutorial. The tutors will talk to you more about some tutorial and assignments during the tutorial class, okay? So for the time being, did anyone have any questions you want to ask? Yes?
How many people will be presenting in one class? One? Why so? Because there are only 6 classes and we have 17.
There is only, there's 6 weeks of presentation, so there are 18 questions. So each student will select one question, right, out of that 18 questions. Is that clear? Yeah, okay. So you can select the time and the topic, right? So if you prefer week 6, then you select the question within week 6, okay, or later weeks, etc. Okay. Yeah. Any other questions? Okay. I got a number of students asking me about the second assignment in terms of the groups, right? The number of people in the groups. So normally we expect 3 people in a group, right? So if you have 3 people in a group, then you can form a group, okay? If not, then you let me know, okay? But I will open the group assignment instructions and enrollment later. Okay. So we talk about that later. We haven't really touched assignment 1, all right? So we talk about assignment 2 later. Okay. Anyway, any other questions? All right. Okay. So let's start our lecture for today. So today we look at the public sector accountability and also the differences between the private sectors and the public sector. So for your reading, please read the books, right? Chapters 1 and 2. And chapter 1 is also reading for last week's topic. So these two chapters covers the concepts of accountabilities as well as some of the issues and the challenges relating to public sector accountabilities. Okay. The second readings look at the process and channels of public accountabilities and some of the issues against that relates to accountabilities. Now the third one, it's quite interesting, right? So you distinguish between the public and the private sectors, and this one would also this article is also relevant for next week's topic as well. Okay, so once you understand the difference between the two, then it will be much easier, right, for next week's topic. Now there are other references which look at some more in-depth issues, right, relating to public sector accountabilities. Now, chapter 3 of the books, they look at the institutional arrangement in Australia and also some of the accountability issues. And the Newbridge 2015, these articles highlight some the implications of legislative and accounting standard requirements for the concepts of public sector accountabilities and how concept change over time. So it's quite interesting, and the issues there will also be relevant for next week's topic as well. The next one, look at how the new public management, we talked about new public management last week, right? So how new public managements change the roles of public sector managers and also the public sector accountabilities as well. Okay, and the last one is compare accountability in the private and the public sectors, and so it's also links to the implications of reforms, right, for accountabilities. So basically, they talk about the change. Okay, all right. Okay, so what we will look at for today. Now, last week we looked at the roles of governments, and so today we just continue from last week's topic, and we will recap the nature of government, okay, briefly, and then we will go into some why accountability is important, and the systems of accountability, some of the concepts, right, accountability mechanisms, and some of the challenges, problems, right, in relation to exercising accountability. Okay, all right. Now, before we start the next slides, I'd like to ask any one of you, if I ask you to describe accountability, all right, in 1 or 2 words, what would you say? Anyone? What would you say about accountability in 1 or 2 words? Okay, that's good. All right, so we have, let's put it down here. So we have responsibility. Well, very good. Anyone? Maybe at the back, or do you want to? Duties. Okay. This pen I'm not very. Okay. Any others? Some people at the back. Would you like to try? Go. No. Any others? You must have some more ideas. So. Chrissy. Okay, so this is a bit tricky. What can you explain a bit more? Or? Would you like to? Why do you? What does that mean? Or? It doesn't matter. That's fine. All right. So anyway, now you have some of this in mind. I'm sure some of you have other concepts in mind. All right. But These are some of the ideas, right, that relates to accountability, and we will talk more about the concepts of accountability. So in this topic, right, so see how you will relate to all these. Okay, now again, now let me show you an example. Now I take out a paragraph from the Department of Education and Training website. Okay, so you talk about this one, can you see it? Right, so to improve the outcomes for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander students, at least 3,100 teachers who teach for 4 years in a very remote school will be eligible to have their higher education loan program debt remitted. Right. The higher education loan program, if for those students who are not familiar with that, right? So it's a loan provided to students to study at university, okay? And the loan will be repaid after they graduate, and when their income reach certain level, they will repay them, okay? And this direct financial incentive recognizes significant barriers to recruiting and retaining quality teachers in very remote areas. Okay. So what do you think? Why did the government introduce this policy? Anyone? Just try. Doesn't matter. There's no right or wrong answers. Okay. Yes. Yes, that's good. All right. So yeah. So you try to introduce social equity. Okay. So it is one of the role of the government, right, to make sure that there's equity. Yeah. And this is an education area, right? So if you remember last week, right, we talked about the role of governments and the functions of governments that they provide public goods. Okay, so education is one of the area that the government provides, and of course, this would help to promote some equity, all right, in the educations. All right, so that's good. So that maybe I ask you another question, right? To whom do you think the government is accountable? Now, this is from the Department of Education website, right? So the Department of Education, they will implement the program. So to whom does the department accountable to? What do you think? In implementing this one? Yes, okay, so what do you think? Yep, would be the, okay, anyone, any other idea? Do you think accountable to the people, the general public, or to those students, or what do you think? Do they go that far? Or they just, yeah. You can see it probably is a very difficult question, right? So we will look into, to whom the government is really accountable to, all right, in a minute. And it can be quite complicated, okay? And it involves multi-level of accountabilities as well, right? So we'll look at some of these issues for this topic. Okay. All right, so just now you look at the example. So just recaps what we have learned last week. So in terms of the nature of the governments, and so the government is elected by citizens, right? And the government make collective decisions on behalf of the citizens, right? And therefore they have to be accountable to the citizens. Okay. So one of the important roles of the government is to provide and fund public good services, right? We see some from the example last week as well as the example just now, and social welfare benefits, right? To ensure the equity as well, social impact as well. And so some of the goals of government is to act in public interest, right? So to achieve accountability, efficiencies, and effectiveness, and we'll talk more about these concepts in a minute, okay? So if you look at the nature of the government, it means that accountabilities of the government is important, right? Okay. And why is important, right? So we link it back to the role of government. As we say just now, you make collective decisions on a range of public policy matters, right? And these matters always have an impact, right, on the citizens and on the nations. And we say just now, if there is an education program, it will have an impact, right, on the citizens. And if there is a taxation policy, all right, against it will impact on all the citizens, okay, or any energy policies, right, it impacts on the everyday life of the citizens. And the citizens, they pay tax, right, to the government, so the government have to be accountable, right, for the fund that they entrust to the government in terms of their actions and the consequences of the government's actions as well, okay? So accountability is a fundamental requirement of democratic government, right? Because they are elected by people. Okay. Now, transparency. So this is one of the concepts, quite important concepts within accountability, and the provisions of the information to Parliament, right, and citizens are important for a democratic government. So maybe your transparencies probably relate back to the informations aspect as well, right? So just think about without relevant information, right, or accurate or reliable information, what would happen? Okay, so you or the general public, they would not be informed of the government actions, right? They would not be informed of the consequences of the government policies and their actions, and they won't be in a position to hold the government to account, right? So the provisions of information transparency is really important. Okay. Now, next questions we just talked about, right? So to whom the governments should be accountable. As we said just now, there are different level of accountabilities, and the concept is not that straightforward. Okay. Now, I'm not sure whether you know about a government program some time ago in relation to the home installations, right? The home installation program I has been talking about for a long time, okay, in Australia. And under this program, the governments provide funding to the suppliers to install installations in the houses, right, of the general public. Okay. Now, the programs roll out during the global financial crisis, right, in order to boost job employment, as well as to encourage efficient use of energy, right? So there is a good intentions and for public interest, but unfortunately, there are some problems with the implementations, right? So roll out too quick, right? And it has problem in the implementations, and it caused the death of 4 workers, unfortunately. Right, so it has been quite a serious issues in Australia. So for this example, what do you think? Who should be responsible? Right, we're going back to the concept there. Who should be responsible? For the problem, right, or for the consequences, the failure of the program. Do you think at that time it's Department of Environment, right, was responsible for rolling out the program? So do you think it's the department's responsibility, or who else's responsibility? Anyone? Or the minister's responsibility? It can be difficult, is that right? Yeah. And this is really an issue of who should be responsible, okay? So there is no clear-cut answer. So if I show you the diagram that we have looked at last week. Probably we haven't looked at this last week, sorry. Now, we mentioned about Australian government is under the Westminster systems of government, okay? So it's under the Westminster systems of political and financial accountabilities. So under this system, right, the Westminster systems, the electoral, right, is the most top level, right, the general public of the top level of accountability, and the parliaments represents the public, okay, because the electorate, they elect and form the governments, okay, within parliament. And if there is any program or funding, right, it require the approval of the parliaments. So once they are approved, right, the executive government, which consists of all the ministers, right, will implement the program, okay. And so once they implement the program, the ministers can delegate, right, the authorities or the implementations to senior executive, right, or other public sector managers in the departments or in any agencies or in government business enterprise or statutory authorities, okay? So in all other agencies. So there is a lines of responsibility here, all right? So you can see this dot 9 is the lines of responsibility from the electoral parliament, the minister, and down to the public sector manager, okay? And the public sector managers, because they have the responsibility, they have the flexibility to make the decisions, and therefore they are accountable for their actions as well. But in this case, right, the public sector managers, they are accountable to their superior only, okay? So if there is any middle level manager, they are accountable to senior level manager, all right? And the senior level manager may be accountable to the senior executive. It can be the secretary or the head of departments, etc. Okay? And then the secretary is probably accountable to the minister, and the minister is accountable to the parliament, and the parliament accountable to the electorate. Okay? So this is the Westminster system of accountability. This diagram is from your book, okay? So you can look at that in the chapter. Okay, so now you understand this system. So what do you think is the advantage of this system? Do you think it's a good system? Anyone? Anyone think it's good? Yes? Okay. Any reasons?
It's hierarchical.
Mm-hmm.
So people are responsible for people underneath them.
Yes. Yes, that's good. Okay. So the line of responsibility is very clear. All right. So clear line of responsibility, a clear line of accountability. People know what they are responsible for, what they are accountable for, to whom they are accountable. Okay. But what's the problem? Is there any limitations of the system? I guess every system has some limitations, so what do you think? Anyone think about? Just now, we talk about some of the example, right? So the home insulation program. Okay. There's, some disastrous results. So do you think down to the manager in the department should be responsible, right? So if the departments of environments roll out the program, do you think these people should be responsible for the failure of the program? Yeah, but based on this lines of accountability, they are only accountable to their superior, right? The secretary accountable to the minister, and the manager here is just accountable to the secretaries, okay, or the senior manager. So it means that if they are only accountable to the superior, the interests of the public may be overlooked. All right. So what is the ultimate purpose, right, of the program? Okay, that may be overlooked. All right. And so in this case, very often some people will think the minister should be responsible, right? They delegate the authority, okay? And so there is it's not very clear cut actually in terms of if there is problem, who is accountable, okay? So that is the issues because the governments they should act in public interest, right? So so very often the public interest might be overlooked because they only accountable to their senior managers or superior, okay? All right. So we have gone through the slides already, right? So the accountability, so the parliaments approve and provide financial authority to operate the program, and the executive devolves some of its authority to senior management of department and agencies, and some senior management has a responsibility and accountability, right, for the use of public resources and trust to them. Okay, so this is the line of accountability. All right. Okay. So if you look at the Commonwealth governments, right, where are the sources of accountabilities? There are two main sources, right? The constitutions of the Commonwealth and the PGPA Act, right, the Public Governance Performance and Accountability Act, right, 2013. We mentioned this act last week, and it replaced the previous Financial Accountability and Management Act, right? As we say something, if you read any articles, come across the Financial Accountability and Management Act, right? Just remember that it's being replaced, all right, by the PGPA Act. Okay, so the Constitution, it requires the political and financial accountabilities of government, and it also provides the basis, right, the principles on which different forms of government are organized, right? So it specifies how the departments or other governments are organized, and it also represents the norms of the government behavior, right? So, and based on the constitutions, legislations can be drawn up, right? So one of these would be the PGPA Act, okay? So the legislation can be drawn up, and which will define the systems of accountabilities, okay, and the responsibility of the governments, and in what way they should be accountable, etc. Right. So the PGPA Act is also specifies the systems of government accountability, all right, and they highlight some of the accountability mechanisms. Say, for example, it specifies the internal control, right? So the responsibility of governments to provide a good systems of internal control. What is the role of they call it accountable authority, right? So you can be the chief executive or secretary, okay? And what is the role of audit committee, and the responsibilities of auditor generals, etc., and also some guidance on performance measurements, right? So they set up a systems of accountability through this act, okay? So one of the accountability is the financial accountability, and we talked about that last week as well, but it links it back to here. I'll show you the diagram that we looked at last week. So last week we looked at the cycle of Commonwealth financial accountability. Right. As we say somewhere, the Constitution will set up, right, or define the government's roles and responsibilities, and if there is any budget requirement, right, require parliamentary approval. Now, the budget, it plays an important role of in the accountability systems. Okay, so budget is not just a planning document, all right? It's not just a resource allocation document, right? In this case, it's actually an accountability mechanisms as well, right? Because based on which the public sector manager as well as the government is being held accountable for the money that they spend and be accountable for their financial management. Okay, so so the budgets play a very important role, right, in government. Okay, so once they spend the money, they provide an account, right, and the Auditor General's audit the accounts, right. So Auditor Generals again they play a very important role, right, in terms of accountability. So why Auditor General is important? Okay, apart from auditing the financial statements or the accounts, right? It also provides their performance audits, right? Look at the efficiencies, effectiveness of the government. Okay, and it can help to identify the problems actually, right? So yeah, through the audit, it identify the problems, and it suggests some way to improve the performance of the government. So the Auditor General play a very important role, right, in terms of the accountability area. And same as the JCPOA, right, we'll talk more about the JCPOA in a minute. Okay, all right. So you can see here we have all these financial accountability. Is there any other kind of or types of accountabilities, right, apart from financial accountability? There will be, okay. Okay. Now there are different types of accountability. So I use Stewart's 1984 concept of accountability. So it suggests two essential elements of accountability. Right? One is called the elements of account, and the other is holding to account. So the account, right, or the elements, is related to the provisions of information. Right? Say, for example, the annual report, right, providing information, financial statements or budget statements, etc. So these are the accounts, right? So elements of the accounts, so just providing the information. Apart from that, it also allows possibilities of question the account, okay? Through the queries and questions of the account, it forms the basis of judgment of the actions, okay? And so that links to the next elements about holding to account. Holding to account is to make a judgment, right, about an action based on the information, right, based on these informations, right. Apart from making a judgment, it's also involved taking actions, right, taking actions to ensure the accountability. Okay, so say for example, the government can make inquiries, right, into certain issues, certain areas, right, so that take actions, and undertake some government reviews, right? Even audit, right? Audit is part of this holding to account, okay? And the audit provide recommendations, and so the agency has to respond to the auditor's recommendations, right? So this is all part of holding to account. And of course, to hold someone to account, you need information, right? So you need elements of account. So public accountability will require both elements, okay? So it's not enough to just provide the information, right? And it's also required to take actions and to hold people to account, okay? So, so you require both elements, okay? And this public accountability would have implications, right, for public confidence. Right, so if you think about if people ask you, do you have confidence in governments? Okay, what would say? Because look at some of the information, right? So you will base your judgments on some of the information, maybe based on the audit report or based on some news, right? News about the program, government program, news about the government performance, etc. Right? So you base on some information and then you make a judgment. Okay, so. the information will inform the general public, and the public will make a judgment on that, okay, and take action. What action can the public take? If they do not have confidence in the government, they do not elect them in the next election, okay, in the democratic government. So yeah, so they can take some actions, okay. All right. So now the interpretations of these elements of accounts and holding to accounts will depend on the purpose of accountability. That means for what it is accountable, right? For what purpose? And so, so stewards highlights different types of accountabilities or form the basis of accountability, right, into a ladder of accountability. So there are higher level and lower level, and in fact, yeah, the higher level is in here, all right, so this is the higher level, this is the lower level. It's probably, I should put it the other way around, right? Okay, so there are different areas of accountability. So the accountability for property and legality is related to the avoidance of illegal actions. Okay, so it's related to the spending of public money. All right, so the public money has to be spent as authorized. All right, so remember we talked about just now, any budget allocations has to be approved by the parliaments. Right, once it's approved, then it can be implemented. Okay, so the money you have to spend based on what is approved, based on what is authorized. Okay, because there is a legal backing. Okay, the other one is the process accountability. Right, so whether the process use and time and effort spent to perform the task are adequate or not. Right, so we have to see whether there are proper procedures in place. All right, yeah, and particularly in implementing a program. Okay, whether proper procedures are in place, whether there's any wastage of resources, okay, or any malpractices, okay, in relation to the process. Okay. And the next one is performance accountability. So it relates to whether the government meet required standards or not. All right. Okay. So there might be different kind of standards. For example, there might be a quality of service standard, all right, or safety standards, or environmental standards, or whether a particular government agency comply with certain requirements, comply with legislations, etc. Okay. Now standards can be set by legislations or by guidelines. All right. So government have a lot of guidelines, all right, to guide the operations of the government, and standards can also be set by public expectation, right, in the public sector. Right, so the public can expect certain standards performed by the government. Okay. Program accountabilities it relates to whether the agencies meet its objectives or not. Right. So for each programs, it has its own objectives, or the organization has its objectives, right? So whether the agency meets its objectives or program objectives or not. Now this is a very important area, right? So it shows whether the government is operate effectively. Okay. Now of course there are some issues about measuring whether the objectives is achieved or not. Okay. Right. So we'll talk more about that in later topic, but this is an important area of meeting the objective, right? It shows the effectiveness of the government. And the last one is the policy accountability, so that is the higher levels, right? So it's accountability to citizens for the pursuit of government policy. Right? So government set the policy, and so based on that policies, they have a number of programs, and so that roll out for the citizens. As we mentioned just now, right at the start, the government policies or the program have an impact on most of the citizens. Okay, So it's very important that the government accountable, right, for the policy that they set. So overall, this one is related to the accountability to the citizen and to the public. Okay. So from here, you can see this lower level accountability. They relate to the accountability by standards. Okay, say like there is a requirement here, right, by standards, and in terms of the higher level, they are accountability by judgments, right? So there are judgment involved in terms of assessing the accountability here, right? So there's a higher level of accountability. Okay. So these are some of the ways of looking at accountability. Now, accountabilities can also be interpreted based on performance, right? So there are different ways of looking at accountability. So this is one set of concepts, right? Let's look at another types of concepts about accountability. Okay. So that is I draw from out the book, right? With different level of accountability that links to performance. So I'll show you the diagram. This is from the book, okay? The lower level here as the regularities and legalities, right? So it's about the fiduciary accountability, right? So it's relating to whether we meet the requirement of the process or not, right? So you can see that some of these concepts are related back to Stewart's letter of accountability. Okay, some may overlap. Okay, and the concept of economy, right, is related to input, right? So the level of input that should be controlled. And then efficiency. So efficiency is the relationship between input and output. So normally you know about input. Okay, so if you have done management accounting, you're probably very familiar with the concepts. Right, so with efficiency, so it's the relationship between the two. Okay, so if you use less input to produce certain output, then it's efficient. Or on the other hand, given a certain level of resources, right, the input, if you produce more, then there's efficiency. Okay, so that is the concept of efficiencies. And effectiveness basically look at whether objectives are achieved, right, or the policy outcomes are achieved. Now, this is a brief diagram, right, of the accountabilities of performance, right. So for public sectors, performance are normally interpreted as economy, efficiencies, and effectiveness. And we'll talk more about these concepts in a minute, right, in greater details. So this is the increasing sophistication. So this is more sophisticated. Right, and this is more fundamental, and in fact, the regularities and legalities is quite important for government, right? So it's the foundations of the Westminster systems of accountability. Okay, and these areas are interrelated as well, right? Say, for example, if the government wants to achieve certain objectives, they cannot do it at the expense of efficiencies or economy, right? They still have to consider that the resources are properly used, okay, and ensure efficiency. So they cannot achieve one at the expense of the others. They have to look at the whole performance, okay? Now, how about we have a break now, and then we come back and we look at some of the details of this area. Now let's continue to look at these concepts. Right. So regularities and legalities, it relates to the compliance of government spending with financial regulations and the requirements. Right. So as we say, the government's budget is drawn up in accordance with regulations, right, and rules, okay, and has to be approved. So it ensures that the public money is spent as authorized, right? So the focus is to control the unauthorized use of public resources, right, and to control any potential fraud, right? As we mentioned just now, this is a very important area for public sector, and it's also the foundations of the Westminster systems of accountability as well. Right. Economy relates to how much and on what should the money be spent. Okay, so it basically relates to the inputs, right, resources, and what is the cost of the resources that should be spent on a program, right, or on an activities. Okay. And to ensure that there is no waste of money. Okay. For efficiency, just now we mentioned about the concepts of efficiencies. It relates to the relations between inputs and output. Right? Now, this term is very technical, but in terms of public sector, do you think this is applicable, right, to the public sector, or is there anything missing, sorry, if you apply these technical concepts to the public sector? Because a lot of the area provided by the governments, right, their public goods, and also some, say the education or transport, or those are essential services. Okay, and the qualities of services provided to the general public is very important, right? But the quality is not captured in the traditional concepts of efficiency or these technical concepts of efficiencies, right? So we need to consider the qualities as well. The Department of Finance and the regulations at that time, so 2011, and now it's called the Department of Finance only. Okay? So they define efficiencies in a different way, and their definitions take into considerations of quality as well. So they said efficiencies in government is about the change, right, in the relationship of inputs to output, right, at current prices in specific areas of public services. Right? So it depends on what area. Okay? And that improvement in the relationships can be claimed as efficiency. Okay? So if there is any improvement in these relations, we can say it's efficient, right? If, right, there is a condition, proportionally less of a resources is used to deliver particular services, right? So less of these, and if no decline in the qualities of relevant services or output, right? You can use less of these to produce same level and qualities of output, provided that there is no decline in the qualities of output, right? Then you can say it's efficient, or there are improvement in the qualities or quantity or both of output, right? So in terms of the output, it actually incorporates the ideas of both quantity and qualities of output, right, in defining what is meant by efficiency. Okay, so efficiencies. So to distinguish economy from efficiencies, all right. So economy is basically no wastage, all right. So no waste of money, no waste of resources. Okay, focus more on inputs here. Okay, and efficiencies is also focused on output, right? The link between these two, right, in terms of how you use the resources and in relation to the output that's produced. And the output has two aspects, right? Both you have to take into considerations of both quantity and quality of output, right? Okay, so these are the efficiency concept. Now, efficiency is important, right, in the budget process, as we mentioned just now. The government has to be accountable for their financial management, right, which is very important for government, and the concepts of efficiency is getting more important as well when the government pursue market-based government practices, such as contracting out, right, outsourcing, or public-private partnerships, that kind of, or introduce market competitions, etc. All these market-based government practices. And one of the purpose of pursuing market-based government practices is to enhance the efficiencies, right? Because the governments are really embrace the private sector efficiencies, right? So they adopt the private sector's practices. But this also raises concern about the accountabilities, right? So it raises tensions, right, at the level of accountability. So in order to achieve efficiencies, other area might be ignored, right, such as quality of services or the effectiveness or the social impact, right, might be ignored because the private sectors may not be willing to take into considerations of social impact, right, or if their profit focus, and if they run into difficulties, right, financial difficulties, they may cut costs. Right, if they cut costs, that means they might cut quality as well. So, so that means their efficiencies might be trade-off with other area of accountability, like effectiveness, right, or qualities, etc. Okay, so there is a tension between efficiencies and other areas of accountability. So effectiveness is, well, the concept is straightforward. It's just it relates to the achievements of government objectives. Right? So if the objectives or the policy outcomes are achieved, right, then we can say it's effective. Okay? So governments make collective decisions on behalf of the citizens, and it needs to meet the society's expectations, right, to gain the trust of the citizens. Now this one highlights the effectiveness is really important for government, right? Because the government, in order to gain the trust of the citizens, they have to achieve their objectives, right? So they have to meet the society's expectations. Okay, their expectations might define what they want to achieve. Okay, so the measurements of effectiveness can be difficult. We will talk about the measurements of effectiveness or outputs, etc., in later topic, right, when we look at the performance measurements area. Okay, so for now you have look at various concepts, right, of accountability in public sector. So you can see it's not just one area, right? So you can involve the property, right, the process, the performance, or if performance, right, you can relate to all the economy, efficiency, effectiveness, and transparency issues as well, okay, and the achievements of public policy. So they are multi-dimensional, okay, for the accountability concept, and it's also interrelated, right, with each other. As we see there might be a trade-off between efficiency and effectiveness, but the government shouldn't do that, right? So they have to consider both as well. All right. Okay. So far, we look at all these concepts, and you can see there they relate back to what the government needs to achieve, right? What they're responsible, what they need to do, and so the efficiency and effectiveness concepts, I think, it basically relates back to this, okay? And we talk about transparencies and the information that we need, to inform the accountability, the assessments of accountability, etc. Now, any other things is missing here. There's another concept, okay, about fairness and equity. I show you an example. I take out some information, right, from the news. Now, this was back to 2 years ago, right, 2017's budget. So the government, talk about the university fees. Okay, so the students are set to face higher university fees next year, right? So that was back to 2017 as part of the federal government's overhaul of the higher education sector. Under the proposed change, right, student fees will increase 7.5%, right, by 2021, and help repayment. This is the loan repayments, higher education's loan, right, repayment. Income threshold will be decreased from 55,000 to 42,000. So currently, the students, if they go out when they graduate, they find a job, their income level reach 55,000, they start to repay. Right, below that, they don't need to repay, and they want to reduce the threshold, right, to 42,000. And the federal government estimates the change will save 2.8 billion over 4 years. We are trying to maintain fairness and equities across the system. Okay, that is the education minister say that. Now, why do you think the government's introduced this policy? Okay, why? Why the government want to increase fees and reduce the threshold for repayment? Why they want to do that? I think, yeah. If this really happens, it affects students. Right. Yeah. Others? Any suggestions? Do you think it relates to the government budget? Well, yeah, the governments have budget deficits anyway, right? So it's a way to be more efficient. Okay, so if they try to be efficient, or they have to find somewhere, right, to reduce the budget spending. Right. Okay, so this is one of the area that the government try to pursue. So also pursues the efficiencies. And do you think this is a fair policy? The education ministers say is try to maintain fairness and equity, right, across the sector, across the system. So, do you think it's fair? Or too little information for you to make the judgment on that? Right? Of course, a lot of our students, they won't say it's fair. Right? And so as you can see, there is really a trade-off, right, between some efficiencies and other area, right, effectiveness or the fairness. Right? So these days, for government, apart from looking at efficiency and effectiveness, they also need to consider whether the policy is fair, right, or achieve equity or not. Okay, so because all these are important services, or the education area are important services to the public, and so let's look at the fairness and equity concept, right? Why the governments need to consider fairness and equity, right? Because the role of government, right, is to ensure social equities and welfare of the citizens. So this is an important role of government. However, efficiencies and effectiveness may not necessarily result in social equities and fairness, right? Based on the example we have just now. And other examples would be the market-based practices, right, and the user pay principle, right? Like the example we have just now, if the government increase fees, right, it means that those who are wealthier, right, might be able to pay, and therefore they can attend. When the government pursues all these commercial practices, right, or they focus on smaller governments and also under the new public management, they want to achieve efficiencies, and so many of the services are also based on user pay principles, but this will result in unfair treatment to some group of the citizens who do not have the ability to pay. Okay, so the government has to consider that, and particularly that is the difference between the private sector and the public sector, right? Because the private sectors they focus on the provisions of private goods, right, and more focus on profitability. But the public sectors they provide the public sectors provide public goods. Okay, so we have to consider the nature of public goods as well. And also the government have to pursue the public interests, okay, and to protect the public interests, okay. For the public goods, because it's non-exclusible, right, so one person consumes the public goods, you can't exclude others, so that means they cannot be provided based on user pay. Right, or based on the ability to pay, right? So it has to be based on needs, okay? What is the needs of the citizens, okay? Right? And for the equities, of course, the market mechanisms may not result in equity, right, or in the distributions of income and wealth, okay? Because they maximize the private wealth, right, rather than more equal distributions of income and wealth in society. Okay, so you can see the public sectors has a broader focus on accountability, right? And as we say, there are different level and concepts of accountability. Okay. Now, so far, you might be a bit confused or look at a number of concepts of accountability. I want to show you another example so you can have a look at the area of accountability. Okay. Okay. So this is taken out from the auditor's report, right, 2016-17. The government has a 20 million trees program for reducing the negative environmental impact. Okay. So under the program, which was announced in May 2014, the Australian government has committed to working with the community to plant 20 million native trees and supporting vegetations by 2020. So the program, which is administered by the Department of Environment and Energy, is intended to re-establish native vegetation, provide all these habitats and improve livabilities of Australian cities, the towns, etc. And the Australian government has allocated 70 million, okay, towards the delivery of this program. All right, and as of 2016, so 42 million have been committed, okay, and plant more than 13 million trees, okay. And these are spent through a combination of grants or procure service providers, okay. So what happened? Do you think the program is effective? So let's look at some of the audit findings. Now there are a number of audit findings. I only take out a couple of them. Okay. So one of the audit findings says the effectiveness of the award of funding under the program was undermined, right, by widespread weaknesses in the administrative practices. So you can see how effective is the program, right, is affected by how it's being implemented, right? So you can see here, it might be related back to what we call the process, right, accountability, or whether there are proper procedure in place, etc. Okay, and in particular, established assessment processes were not followed, conflicts of interest were not appropriately recorded and managed, okay, the documentation is not properly done, eligibility assessments were not conducted in a transparent or timely manner, okay. So you can see the effectiveness is undermined, all right, because of the process, accountability is not followed, and you can see there are other areas of accountabilities as well, right, like transparency, okay. Eligibility assessment was not conducted. So what is the consequence then? Okay. So if let's look at the other two, right? Then we talk about that later. Too late applications were accepted by the department against the recommendation of the assessment team, okay, and property advisors, and without the reasons being documented. Okay, so this give the grants. And 17 applications that failed the published eligibility criteria were ultimately funded, okay. And this includes 12 applications awarded in funding for ineligible activities. So what is the consequences if the grants are being, funding, all right, is provided, application is granted, and but based on ineligible criteria, they're not following the criteria. It means that some eligible program, right, or applications may not be funded. So this is an equity issue, right? Okay, it's not fair to those applications that might meet the eligibility criteria, but is not funded, okay, because the funding is go to other. Okay, so there is a process problem, there is a equity problems, and anything else, probably quite important, is the property. Right, the resources are not properly used. Okay, the public money are not properly spent because it's being spent on some of the grants that are not meeting the eligibility criteria. So there may be potentially some misallocations of resources as a result. Right, so you can see some here. Several areas of accountabilities are not achieved, right, under the assessment here. Okay, so if you are interested, you can read the report. It's quite interesting. So this is audit by the ANAO, right, the Australian National Audit Office. So you can see some one of the Auditor General, right? So responsibility is to improve the operations, efficiencies, and effectiveness of the government program, right? So just try to assess the efficiency and effectiveness. Okay, so if there are problems with the programs, so what should the government do? So how can we ensure government accountability? So there are certain mechanisms, right, to ensure government accountability. Audit is one of the mechanisms. Okay, so you can see some here, the audits by Auditor General, they produce a report, so they provide the information, and based on this information, people make a judgments on the effectiveness and other areas of performance of the program. Okay, so it's one of the accountability mechanisms. Okay, so there are different accountability mechanisms apart from the audit. In terms of the institutional structure, we talked about Parliament last time. Right, so Parliament is an area that for the debates of the policy, and so through that kind of debate, and you can hold the government to account. Parliamentary oversight committees. There are a number of parliamentary committees. One of that relates more to us, right, is the JCPAAs, right, it's Joint Committees of Public Accounts and Audit. So they play a very important role. So normally all these parliamentary committees, they are established to make inquiry, right, or to review any issues that require a more lengthy period of inquiry, right? Okay, and so they provide assistance to the Parliament, right, to scrutinize the government's performance, government activities. So the JCPAAs it reviews the ANAO reports. Okay, so any of the Auditor General report that was produced, the JCPAA has a role to review them. They may not review all of them, right? But if any particular important issue, they do review, and they do review some of the financial statement audit as well. Okay, so apart from the scrutinizing the executive government's activities, right? They also reviews other areas as well. Say, for example, some the PGPA Act, right, once it's introduced, the JCPA also review, right, the PGPA Act, and the JCPA also reviews the performance measurement framework of the governments, right, or any issues relating to the usefulness of information, etc. Okay, so some involve quite a wide range of areas. Right. So the JCPA is has a very high reputation, right? Is for holding the government for accountability. Okay, so you say, and there are other reviews body. We talk about some Auditor General already, so I won't go into any details of that. But one thing, just like to ask you some, what enables Auditor Generals to hold the government to account? What do you think? It's an independent officer, all right? So it's independent from the executive government. So this enables Auditor General to provide an independent audit, okay? So that is an important mechanism. Right. Constitutional requirements, right, for financial accountability. Again, so we look at that already. So the constitutions they provide a basis, right, for the government to set up the accountability systems, and any budget, right, will require the approval of the Parliament. Okay, so that the government is accountable for the money spent. Reporting requirements, again, is another important area. Right? We talk about transparency. Right? So how to ensure transparency. So reporting requirement is important. The government departments and agencies, they are required to provide annual reports, right, to the Parliament. Right? So the annual report will set out their activities and some of performance information as well as financial information. So financial statement is part of the annual report, okay, and they are audited by the Auditor General. The annual report has to be tabled in Parliament, right? So that is different from the private sector, okay? The government annual report, they are tabled in the Parliament, all right? So the Parliament can scrutinize the activities of the government through the annual reports. Okay. Now the annual reportings and performance requirements, right, is also emphasized in PGPA Act. I show you a paragraph. This is a paragraph taken from the bill, right, the PGPA Bill 2013, before it's being passed to an act, and there is an explanatory memorandum, and it talks about the bills, right, strengthen and simplifies accountability across Commonwealth entities. It places a great emphasis on performance monitoring, evaluations, and reporting. Right? So performance and reporting is a huge issue. And it also provides greater clarification in relation to annual reporting. Right? The requirements for annual reporting under the current framework can be inconsistent because they come from different pieces of legislations or the applications of general policy. The bills give the JCPA an enhanced roles in approving the proposed annual report requirements for all Commonwealth entities, not just those whose annual reports are provided under the PS Act. Okay, so you can see they highlight the importance of annual reporting as an accountability mechanism, and also JCPA's roles. Okay, now we will look at the requirements of annual reporting and the performance measurement framework in later topic. Okay, so just bear in mind that this is all under the PGPA Act, but we will look at the details in later topic. Okay. All right. Other mechanisms will be the High Court. All right, so decisions are binding, right, for the government. The administrative appeal tribunal, freedom of information, media, etc. Right, so all these mechanisms that can hold governments to be accountable. Okay. Now, we have looked at all these concepts of accountabilities. So are there any problems when the government exercises accountabilities? Are there any challenges or issues involved? Okay. So one of the issues is about the abilities of the parliament to scrutinize government spending. How can the parliament have that kind of ability, right? So it would depend on the information provided to the parliament, right, and also how the budget is estimated. Okay, so one of the issues back to early years, I take this as an example showing the difficulties in exercising accountability by parliaments. Okay, so back to 2009, or prior to that, the budget is allocated based on the outcomes and output framework, right? So these outcomes and output frameworks, it requires the departments and agencies to identify what are their outcomes, what are the outputs that they will produce, right? So this of output that they will produce, and how much money they require to produce that kind of output, right? So that means put a budget, put a dollar value onto the output. But the problem is it's quite difficult to define output and measure output, right? So there is difficulty in identifying and measuring or accurately measuring the output. And so that means the dollar amount that put onto the output, right, to allocate to the output becomes unreliable. Okay, so if the figures are unreliable, it means that the parliament has problem in exercising its control over the budget. Okay, so that means the budget as an accountability mechanism is being weakened, right, based on this framework. Actually, the government budget is based on programs, right? So the government carry out their programs. So the budgets are largely allocated based on program. So after 2009, now the government focus on another framework called outcomes and program frameworks. Okay, so in a way that help to restore the parliament's control, right, over the budget. Okay, so that is one example. Now, another example is about the financial accounting and budgeting systems. Again, I'm using this example. Prior to 2008, the government's budget is based on two sets of accounting and budgeting systems. One is the private sector's accounting system, and another is called government finance statistics system. It's basically the Australian Bureau of Statistics, right? It make use of that to estimate the national statistics. So there are two systems. They produce two financial statements, two budget statements, and because based on different systems, it produce different figures for the same item. Right? So that caused confusion to the parliament, and it means that again there is very difficult for the parliaments to exercise control over the budget. Okay, and now the Australian government, they adopt a harmonised system, and we'll talk more about this system next week. And there is also some concern about the applications of IFRS, the International Financial Reporting Standards, right, to the government accounting and reporting. So currently, the Australian government adopt International Financial Reporting Standards, but we know this is based on the private sector business model. And so the concepts of accountability in the private sector may not be applicable to the public sector, right? Because public sectors has a different concepts of accountability. So that causes some kind of difficulty in exercising accountability. All right. Okay. So that is the issues about the informations. Now, another issue is about the appropriations, right? So the money allocated out of the budget, right, to the department is called appropriations. And since the government adopt the accrual accounting system, right, so that means the accrual budget allow the government agencies to carry over any unspent money, okay, unspent appropriations. And this create a chance for the agencies to spend as they wish, right, rather than to spend the money as authorized by the government. Okay, so that creates some concern about whether the money is really spent as authorized, right? Okay, and so and therefore there's a concern about the loss of parliamentary control, right, over the appropriations, and to address these issues in 2007. The Senate Standing Committees, right, and it recommended the agencies to be required to report to Department of Finance of any unspent money, right? And so a consolidated report about all this unspent money will be provided to the Parliament so as to restore the Parliament's control, right, over this unspent money. Okay. All right. So the next issues, as an example, right, about the problem in accountability is the market-based policies and practices. We talked about this already because the government wants to pursue efficiency. Okay, so they introduce all this market-based approach, but there is also a risk of market failure, right, or compromising the quality of services, efficiencies, and effectiveness, because the private sectors, they are more profits-oriented, right, so they may not be willing to provide those goods and services which are not financially viable, right, or they might make a loss, okay, and so so that creates problems. And because of the involvement of the private sectors, it means that many aspects of the operations, right, or the business transactions is treated as commercial confidentiality. Okay, so the governments make use of the commercial in confidence contract, in this kind of market-based approach. And so this means it leads to secrecies, right, not transparent, and so so that affects the accountability. Okay, so again, we will look at these issues, right, in one of the later topics. Okay, the difficulty in the use of outcomes and output in measuring performance. So this link it back to what we mentioned just now about the budget area, right? So now the government is not using the outcomes and output framework for budget purpose, but this concept, at least the outcome concept, are still important, right, to the government, and the government still refers to the output as well, right? But the problem of measuring outcomes and outputs still exists. Okay. And finally, the ministerial responsibility and devolutions of authority. Now, this is the part that we mentioned earlier in the lecture, right? So to whom the government should be accountable, okay? So whether what is the responsibilities of the minister? So we know under the Westminster system, right, so the ministers are accountable for the formulations of government policy, and the public servants, they provide information and advice to the ministers, right, and they also implement the programs, and they are accountable directly to the superior and to the minister, and that means they are not directly accountable to the public. Okay, so that creates some issues, but in the 1990s, right, since 1990s, right, there are reforms, and there seems to be a shift of attentions and to allow the public service to be accountable to the parliamentary committee, and some of the external reviews agencies. Say, for example, the secretary of the department may be required to attend the parliamentary inquiry, right, and respond to the parliamentary inquiry. So that means the public service has to be directly accountable to the parliaments as well, right? So this parliamentary committee is part of the parliament, so they are directly accountable to the parliament. So what happened to the minister then? So what is the responsibilities of the minister? Okay, sometimes the minister may consider that because a number of the activities, they are not informed, right? They do not have enough information, so they are not responsible. And because of the public servants now, they are directly accountable to the parliament. Okay, it means that the ministerial responsibility might be weakened. Okay, so there is some concern about that. All right. So so far we have looked at the different types of accountabilities and also some of the challenges. And we have talked about the differences between the private sector and the public sectors along the way. Right? So I guess you have some ideas already. And so these ones provide a very good summary of the differences between the two sectors. Excuse me. It's taken from the book's chapter 4, right? You do not need to read chapter 4, but I think these tables provide quite a good summary. So we talk about the private sector model, right? In the private sector models, individuals' choice drives the market. So if the market, right, is all based on the individual demands, right, in the private sector, but in the public sector, they make collective decisions. Okay, so rather than individual decisions. Okay, fine. In the private sectors, the consumers is important, right? So the focus is on the consumer, but in the public sectors, the focus is on the citizens. Okay, so the citizens elect the governments, and therefore the government has to be act on behalf of the citizen and to be accountable to them. In the private sector, demand and price determines the availability of services. So this is all based on the market mechanisms, right, in determining what kind of services or what kind of goods and services will be provided, right, to the public. But for the governments, the provisions of goods and services or allocations of resources should be based on needs, right, okay, rather than the market mechanisms. And in the private sectors, the access to services depends upon the exclusions of non-payers. Right? So in the private sectors, the owners has private property rights, okay? And it also depends on the ability to pay, right? So so only those who can afford to buy the product will have the product, okay? But in the public sectors, the services of general government sectors are available to all, okay? So that is the public goods, okay, irrespective of ability to pay, and also in the presence of externalities. So the government has to deal with the public goods and externalities, and the nature of the public goods, it means that it's available to all, regardless of the ability to pay. The private sectors is satisfactions of needs through participations in the market. Right? So we know some of the goals of the private sector is for income maximizations, right? They focus on financial profitability, viability, but for the public sector, the focus should be more on social justice, equity. Okay, competitions in the private market dominate. However, government might intervene, right, if the market fails. So competition is restricted in impacts, mainly in commercial activities. So for the public sectors, competition is not a key government practice. Okay, so I guess that sums up quite nicely with the two sectors. And again, I try to wrap up, right, with Barton's 1999. It says, why do we have governments in the public sector in modern democratic nations? why not allow private sector to cater for all society's needs for goods and services? Okay, so you have to think about that, so how to answer these questions. Right. So of course, we can see there are differences between the two sectors. Okay, so the private goods have a different natures from the public goods and externality. We talked about that already. And the objectives of private firms, of course, is different from the objectives of public entity. Right. So private firms focus on profit maximization, but public sector should focus on social equity and impact. And therefore, their stakeholders are different. Okay, the stakeholders are different, and it means that the information needs are also different. Right, private sectors mostly serve the shareholders. All right, so probably financial information is more important, but the public sector, they serve a wide range of stakeholders, not shareholders. Okay. Mainly the general public and other stakeholders. So both financial and non-financial information is also necessary. Okay. So all these would have implications for public sector accounting. Okay. In terms of the objectives of financial reporting, so the objectives of financial reporting focus on just decision making or accountability, or what kind of accountability? And uses of financial report, is it only some for investors, or there are other users of financial reports in the public sectors? Okay. Assets and liabilities, of course, the public sector have specific types of assets and liabilities that need to be accounted for. Okay. And the private sector concepts of operating results and solvency, would that also be applicable to the public sector? Okay. The cash and accrual accounting systems, there any implications for government operations, etc. So we will explore most of these in later topic, right? Next week's topic, we will talk about the accounting system and also some assets and liability in later topics, okay? All right, tutorial start tomorrow, all right, so we'll attend the tutorial, okay? So see you again.